In the previous video of this series, I went over the first season as well as some of the early history and context of the Cartoon Network show Infinity Train. In that video, I discussed the main character Tulip's arc and its wider themes, including self-isolation and divorce. In that video, I had this to say. I don't have much to add to the divorce angle of her arc, but the thing is, that's okay. I'm not going to relate to every struggle in the world. I won't be able to speak much on some struggles, but as long as someone can identify with these situations, then the show is doing what it set out to do, and display a wide spectrum of human emotions and relatable situations, distinct from what other shows were doing and showing at the time. That said, I promise you, I have much more to say about the other arcs in this show.
I'm not foil, I'm not reflection, I'm not a sliver, I'm not a null, I'm not any of the hundreds of names that everyone wants to give me!
Well, that was fast.
I'm about to pull up his wishful curves, and I've been waiting so long, now I gotta resurface. He know we about to talk all the bread and we burn it. Cause I've been feeling cool talk, I've been fucking cool talk.
The second season of Infinity Train aired 5 months after the first, a generally quick turnaround time for an animated series, even one like Infinity Train, that's only comprised of 10-episode seasons, with each episode being 11 minutes long. For reference, high-end indie animation like Hell of a Boss usually takes several months in between roughly 20-minute episodes. To compare apples to apples, Steven Universe, another Cartoon Network show from this time, had breaks of up to 7 months at a time, just for a batch of 4 episodes. This isn't to say one is rushed or one is too slow, but more so to speak to the amount of resources that Cartoon Network was affording this show at the time, being able to crank out quality seasons of animation relatively quickly without a dip in quality. Moreover, in my opinion, Season 2 is the exact opposite of a dip in quality. Without spoiling things right away, this season, in my opinion, has the best overall animation and characters in the show. While the first book had themes of divorce and self-isolation motivating Tulip's arc, part of the reason why I didn't speak much on either of them, despite finding the self-isolation aspects highly relatable, was because there wasn't many instances of this behavior to cite. This is because while the first season needed to have a strong and relatable protagonist, which it did, it also needed to put in the heavy lifting of establishing the world of the train. It needed to focus on establishing the rules of which the setting operates on, and as such, we don't get as much development for Tulip as we do other season protagonists. That said, due to the strong world building of the first season, we get to focus on the characters of each of the following seasons far more than we do the first. At worst, this makes season 1 the vegetables and the other seasons the desserts, but I think that's reductive to how well written of a mystery book 1 was. Lastly, since the rules have firmly been established now, unless special exceptions come up, I can solely focus on the story and the characters, and when it comes to this season specifically, I am more than thankful for that. We start this season with a scene of a familiar face, Mirror Tulip, the reflection of the last season's protagonist. Ashley Johnson returns to voice her in this season, and she gives what I would argue is an even better performance this season. Mirror Tulip has found her way to a metal shop car, which is the perfect place for her to change herself so that she is less recognizable, while also serving the dual purpose of being more unique to herself. She is still on the run from the Flex from the last season, the reflection police that want MT to either rejoin her prime, get recycled into a Flex like them, or die. Since Tulip has long since left the train, and MT is unwilling to join the system that oppressed her for basically her entire existence, she can only run and try to avoid her death. To cover her tracks and evade the Flex, she spray paints any solid reflective surface that she comes across, including her bracelet. What follows is a montage of MT passively walking through cars, only observing and rarely interacting with the denizens. She got her wish of exploring separate from Tulip, but she has the lingering shadow of her identity as a reflection hanging over her. she eventually comes across a passenger waking up in a pod. Since 1-1 regained control of the train in the last season, passengers have been waking up in pods with short info videos to help them get started on their journeys, while also introducing them to concepts like numbers and denizens. While MT watches from afar, she doesn't stop to help the passenger, as she doesn't want to get stuck with someone else again. These opening minutes establish MT's main conflicts throughout this season. Her self-isolation, which is an ironic problem to have given how much she insists that she isn't Tulip, and her identity struggle. Jokes aside, the isolation problems with MT are different. While Tulip is mostly personable and shuts herself out in times of stress, MT shuts people out entirely. MT's problem, while being similar to Tulip in concept, is different in practice. MT's isolation is out of paranoia, not as a coping mechanism in times of stress. Thankfully, her isolation has a more tangible solution. Her identity problems, on the other hand, well, we'll see. MT eventually comes to a marketplace car, and is immediately greeted by the reflection of a jeweler's glass, which immediately summons the flex. What follows is one of many intense and creative chase scenes in this season. The concept of murder-hungry cops who can pop out of reflective surfaces lends itself to a bunch of creativity, and they show it in this season. She eventually escapes into a force car, where she meets the best companion in the entire show, a shape-shifting deer. He's the best. He's later given the name Alan Dracula by Jesse, the human companion of this season. He is... No, that's the end of that sentence. In all seriousness, Jesse can be kind of annoying at times, but he's usually friendly and charming. Upon seeing Jesse messing around, seemingly at Alan Dracula's expense, MT immediately starts to antagonize Jesse while projecting her own fears and insecurities onto him. After a short argument, Alan Dracula falls further into the forest, where we start to learn more about this car. As it turns out, the force car is an entire tree, a family tree. Throughout the episode, we see both MT and Jesse's loyalty. Not to each other, but to Alan Dracula. Conveniently, in a car that encases and turns people who argue with each other into wood, getting over your issues with someone is a necessity. It also explains why this car is the family tree car. The two sides of the family constantly bickered and got encased in the tree, with the couple who married and brought the families together being at the base. Because they couldn't work out their problems with each other, either individually or as collectives, they were doomed to spend eternity at each other's throats. In the process of trying to bring the two families together, we learn Jesse's problem that he has to solve. He is a personable person because he's too soft and wishy-washy. Instead of taking a firm stance when trying to help the families, he tries to stand neutral. While that on its own is admirable, it can sometimes lead to more discourse and be counterproductive to the issue at hand. Knowing when to stand up for what you believe in and care for is Jesse's problem. When he tried to make everyone happy, he got overwhelmed and his number went up. But when he realized that was the case, it went back down. At the same time, MT tried to rush things and just break through the tree. Because aggression and anger make the branches grow, this created a never-ending wall. When she takes a breath and makes an effort to be kinder and interact more with the tree, she is rewarded with an easier path. Thankfully, MT and Jesse were able to break their cycles, and they both decide to travel with Alan Dracula. As part of the deal, MT promises to help Jesse with his number so that she can finally be alone with Alan Dracula again. While MT is on edge and hostile towards most people, given how magnetic Jesse is, it's fitting that he is the one to get MT to be more social too. You see, it's because magnets attract magnets. The two eventually find themselves in a car that's themed after a map. After MT offered to help Jesse with his number, Jesse started to do everything MT wanted without pushback, which naturally causes his number to go up even more. MT has a slight scare when she comes across water, but given that the car is made out of paper, it's not reflective, so she's safe. This car is one of many this season that stands out to me for how creative it is. The paper aesthetic and the low frame rate really add to the atmosphere of this car, and it specifically reminds me a lot of the Spider-Verse movies, especially Across. On the Seas, Jesse talks about his experience with the swim team. recollecting on when he was forced to specialize in a stroke that he didn't like, and even when he got good at it, good enough to qualify for state, he stayed behind because too many people qualified and his team decided that he should sit out. Him working through this history of chronic people-pleasing causes his number to go down. Not by a lot, but it's a start. After realizing they're being trapped by their guide, the two escape the car. In the process, Jesse swims the way he wants to, and when he completes the map, the old-timey paper aesthetic makes way for beautiful paintings, both of which cause his number to go down even more. However, now that the water is complete, it becomes reflective, summoning the Flex. The two run and lock themselves in the nearby towed car. The Flex, mainly Steve, tried to manipulate Jesse into turning on MT, while MT refuses to open up about her past and her identity. The way to solve this card is simple. Kick the toad. That's it, just kick the toad. However, not wanting to cause the toad pain, Jesse essentially halts any and all progress. What's interesting is that when Jesse tries to do what the sign says and kick the toad, his number goes up rather than down. In this car, we learn that Jesse and one of his friend groups peer-pressured Nate, Jesse's brother, into doing a stunt that got him hurt. Jesse let himself be influenced too much by his surroundings that he lost sight of his own morals. After nearly falling for a ploy from the Flex, again, mainly Steve as he tries to play good cop, the two finally work out their situations. Particularly, MT finally opens up about her past identity as Tulip's reflection and how she was stifled living as such. MT just wants to be her own person, with her own morals, her own memories, and her own identity. Hell, MT isn't even a real name to her, she's just using it as a placeholder. Regardless, they finally come to a common ground, eventually having no other option as the Flex break down the door to the car. The two decide to kick the toad together before Alan Dracula steps in. Literally. This ends up being the correct decision, minus the Alan Dracula part. When Jesse was acting on self-interest alone, his number would have gone up. But by acting for mutual interest, having all of the cards on the table, having all of his morals fleshed out, his number decreases. Moreover, it decreases by almost half. Alan Dracula gets infected by a parasite and then sneezes it out by the end of the episode. That's all that happens in this episode. It's funny and all, and it's a great comedic relief episode after episode 4 and before the other half of this season, but it's not very important. The message of this episode is a simplistic version of the one before. You know, maybe forcing Alan's brain to be hijacked by a parasite who controls him like a puppet is a bad thing. It's still a fine episode, just not very important.
I don't feel so good. Why are all my limbs slack? Why can't I move my eyes? Oh, why can't I move my mouth? Is this an internal dialogue? I can't see the end of the horizon. Hatsune Miku!
After that detour, we come to a carnival car that's inside this lucky cat statue. This lucky cat statue houses the main carnival. This cat statue also houses the denizens of this car, who most of them are cats. The main theme is cats. I bet you can't guess who shows up. Yep. Operating the prize booth, the cat from the previous season instructs the two to win 1,000 points, 500 each, in order to access the exit. The two, yes, two, Alan Dracula is focused on eating the fake grass in a claw machine game, are directly competing with a masked stranger who is also trying to get the exit since it only opens once a month. After competing for a bit, they find that Jesse and the masked stranger both rack up points faster than MT because they are passengers and she is a denizen. This is yet another example of her not fitting in and feeling predestined to fail. Jesse reassures her that things will be different once the two of them leave the train, a prospect that surprises MT and causes Jesse's number to decrease even more. However, because of Alan Dracula's obsession,
I'm gonna smash that crane game to the ground.
The pair are too late to get the exit first. However, when the exit is opened, The masked stranger lets a group of hooligan passengers into the car, and they start wrecking shop. This group of people is called the Apex, and they are... oh boy, they are fun. The leader Grace leads the two to the mall car, the base for the Apex, a fanatical group of passengers that worship the train. While some of the kids and teens that enter the train, like Tulip and Jesse, focus on getting off the train as soon as possible, the Apex views the train as an extended playground that they are free to do with as they please. To a similar end, the Apex disregards denizens, calling them nulls based on the fact that they have no numbers. They see 1-1, the true conductor of the train, as nothing more than an imposter of the true conductor, who they don't know at the time is Amelia from last season. Lastly, the Apex functions on a simple power system. Whoever has the highest number is the leader. We saw Amelia at the end of the last season, who had numbers up to her neck after all the misdeeds she committed. Grace, on the other hand, has a number that stretches up half of her arm. Given how lawless and uncaring the Apex are as a group, them befriending Jesse is immediately detrimental to his progress. Grace's right-hand man is a teen named Simon, someone who's even colder than Grace is. The two immediately establish themselves as a dynamic duo of manipulation and charisma. The more Jesse goes along with Grace and Simon, the more he defends them, the more his number goes up. Though, to be absolutely fair, those harpoon packs are sick as fuck. With MT alone, she is subjected to even more ridicule and abuse than she was usually afforded as a denizen, witnessing the Apex's dogma firsthand. With Jesse separated, he is influenced by the other end of the spectrum. Jesse eventually lets slip about MT's identity and her condition of being unable to look into reflective surfaces at the risk of being persecuted by the Flex. However, when Jesse sees the destruction caused by the Apex on an innocent denizen, he gets a well-needed reality check. It's amplified even more when Jesse sees the Apex trying to restrain MT so that they can throw her under the train, throw her to the wheels. When the two try to escape, Grace opens a pocket mirror at MT, and the Flex are summoned. Resolute despite the turn of events, Jesse leads MT to safety, away from those who would hurt her. Even though both groups try to get on Jesse's good side to different ends, he won't let someone he cares for be mistreated for his own gain. And just like that, he did it. He did the exact thing he should have done with his brother. Learning his lesson, his exit spawns. He immediately exits, but he is unable to take MT with him. She is trapped on the other side, while Jesse goes back to the real world, leaving MT with her captors. After Jesse leaves through the exit, that leaves MT, the Flex, and Grace and Simon on the train. Simon criticizes Jesse for being weak, but Grace is quick to reprimand him, and the two quickly leave the scene. A chase scene ensues with MT running from the Flex, which ends with MT and Mace handcuffed together and a train car moving, causing MT and Mace to fall off the train. In the process, Mace has the entire bottom half of his body cut off by one of the train car's wheels. What follows is MT dragging Mace around while he slowly dies, all the while Mace taunting MT. It's genuinely kind of haunting hearing Mace singing a nursery rhyme as he slowly bleeds out, while MT tries and fails to break her handcuffs that keep the two of them bound. For a show airing on Cartoon Network, this is one of the more messed up scenes in not just this show, but any comparable Cartoon Network show at the time. Eventually, the two of them, three if you count Alan Dracula, which you absolutely should, get far enough away from the train where they struggle to move forward, as if a magnet is pulling them, keeping them close to the train. The three are then attacked by Gomes, the same monsters that attacked Tulip throughout the first season. Alan Dracula forms an antler cocoon around them, where Mace proceeds to throw more taunts at MT. Moreover, Mace insults the practicality of MT getting off the train, playing on how she won't fit in regardless of where she is, all while spouting the same ideology as his institution. In the end, MT went with Jesse, and the two of them started to rub off on each other. You might say you became his reflection. MT has enough, and in the middle of defending herself, she realizes there might be a way for her to get a number. If she could find a pod, like one of the ones she found the passenger near, she might be able to trace it back to a car where she can get a number. She starts making a break for the train, but Mace isn't having it. He won't rest until MT either conforms to his system or dies. He would rather take both of them out than see MT succeed. So naturally, MT does what she needs to do to free herself. When I say Infinity Train is one of the most mature shows on Cartoon Network, well, I do mean that it has a bigger focus on the mature themes that are usually in the background of most other Cartoon Network shows. I also mean that this show has some incredibly dark moments for its age rating. If I told you that there was an animated show that depicts someone grinding down a cop's body on the wheel of a train while he screams for mercy, viscera spraying into the main protagonist's face, you would probably naturally think that this was an adult show like Invincible, where that kind of brutality is most fitting. This happened on Cartoon Network in broad daylight. Not Toonami, not Adult Swim, not on any channel aimed later in the day for older audiences. Simply just on Cartoon Network. And what's more, this isn't even the most gruesome death of the show, but we can wait on that. MT climbs up the side of the train, free from Mace, and she sits at the top. She takes a moment to collect herself, before setting off to complete her journey. Eventually, a pod comes by, and MT hijacks it for herself. She returns it to sender and comes across not the place that makes numbers, but rather the place where passengers' tapes are made. Via goop and nanomachines, a passenger's brain is scanned for their memories and processed into tapes. The tapes are then read, and through numerical and moral analysis, the passenger is assigned a number fixed on a specific goal that they need to achieve. MT follows one of the robots with a recently collected tape and follows it to the number car, where passengers are assigned numbers. MT, following a similar plan of action as the pods, tries to intercept a number from a passenger, but it passes right through her. She can't get a number because she's not a passenger. She can't get an exit because she's not a passenger, despite how far she has come, despite being a completely different and fully formed person. It's all for nothing because she is not a passenger. She responds exactly as you think she does. Between this and next episode, Ashley Johnson delivers what I consider some of her best voice acting in recent years. The pain and anger that is expressed not just in MT's animation, but her voice is something that I always think back on when I think of this season and this show. During her rage, she is stopped by a larger robot than any of the others in the facility. She is stopped by a familiar face. She is stopped by...
Hello!
1-1, remembering MT from his adventures with Tulip, tries to restrain MT and talk peacefully with her, but she is not having any of it. She is done being told what she is and what she should do. She is not Tulip. She's not a foil, she's not a reflection, she's not a sliver, she's not a null, she's not any of the hundreds of names that everyone wants to give her. She is her own person who is getting off this train. 1-1, true to his robotic and binary nature, adamantly refuses. MT is a denizen, therefore she is staying on the train. She's not a passenger, therefore she doesn't need a number. Therefore, she is fine. Moreover, given how helpful she was for Jessie, that's all the more reason why she has to stay on the train, so she can continue to help passengers, the people who really need help. After all, she managed to get Jessie's number down to 0, but not off the train? It's revealed that Jessie is still on the train somehow, despite having taken his exit. Turns out that Jessie no longer has a problem with standing up for those he loves. Instead, he has a new problem. He's been separated from his one true friend. The only way to fix this problem and not have Jesse keep showing up on the train is by letting him leave with MT. However, he can't leave with MT because MT isn't a passenger, therefore she is forbidden from leaving. But since she's forbidden from leaving and Jesse isn't, that means they'll be separated, which will then cause Jesse to show back up on the train. This unique set of circumstances essentially forces 1-1 into a paradoxical loop. While 1-1 spirals, the monitor shuts off and Steve appears through the surface. Steve decides to break the law and try to kill MT outright. No badges, no protocol. In the fight, MT decides to do the one thing she was forced to do for most of her life: mirror someone else. By reflecting the light of Jesse's number with her own hand, that means there's technically a number on her hand. She technically has a number. So, 1-1 comes to their decision.
Yeah, sure, whatever.
Steve, in one last attempt to kill MT, grabs her as she's exiting. But there's one other denizen that was left behind. MT finally leaves the train and steps into the real world with Jesse. She finds herself near Jesse's home, in a clearing by a lake. Nate comes to meet the two, and Jesse lets their friend introduce themselves. However, now that she's off the train, and she's just been using MT as a placeholder name until she could find something better, she looks around. She looks nearby, seeing herself reflect in the water, and without fear of her pursuit, she stares into the water with a smile.
I'm Lake.
Season end. So you may be asking yourself, why Lake? Why, of all the possible choices for a new name, why would she go with Lake? To me, there are a few reasons. The first being the obvious. She just finished an arc of self-discovery where she fully separated herself from Tulip. Moreover, she separated herself from the train. When she was on the train, she could never really look at herself in another surface without fear of persecution from the Flex. With that in mind, Lake immediately being able to look at herself in her namesake without fear holds special weight. After all, MT wasn't even a real name to her. It was just a placeholder until she could truly find herself. Another aspect I want to touch on is the allegory at play with Lake's identity and the Flex. In real life, identity is something that a lot of trans people struggle with, and that is the allegory at play here. While it may be unintentional, Lake serves as a truly compelling trans allegory. A lot of trans people, on top of struggling with their names, avoid looking at themselves due to discomfort with their body and appearances. In real life, cops don't melt out of the mirrors and kill unarmed innocent civilians. They usually only do the second part, but that fear still lingers. Speaking of police brutality, the Flex as an institution seek for all reflections to mirror their primaries, and if they don't, then the reflection will either be killed or recycled into more Flex for the institution. This sentiment is also reflected in many real-world governments who, as we speak, are actively attacking the rights and lives of trans people, not just in my country, but in many countries. However, there's still that part of conforming being an option instead of death. So long as the primary and the reflection are bound together, then there's no issue. So long as Lake exists as Tulip, she won't be harmed. So long as Lake doesn't announce herself and cause problems, the Flex won't have to kill her or convert her. But that's not a choice. That's an ultimatum. A threat. Tulip has left the train, so there's no way for Lake and Tulip to reconnect. But even so, they likely wouldn't even if they had the chance. And Lord knows Lake isn't joining the institution that has persecuted her for all of her days that she has spent free, so there is no option with the Flex. In many cases of trans people, the person they were born as is no longer a person they can be. Both physically and mentally, Lake cannot live as Tulip. She is now her own entity with her own identity. She is her own person. In terms of what is strictly shown in the series, Lake is not trans. I acknowledge that. But the story and the themes of what she goes through are not just similar, but allegorical to the trans experience in many ways that I can only appreciate more and more as I grow up. This season came out in January of 2020, and less than 2 years later I would officially start going by MJ and they/them pronouns. While this season didn't make me trans, it did make me start to reassess my own identity and what it meant for me to be my own person. To this day, I'm still improving and working on myself, and I don't ever plan to stop. At the end of the day, identity isn't carved in stone. Identity is a process that I will continue to work on so that I can be the best, truest version of myself, and I have Infinity Train Season 2 to thank for that. Also, before anyone asks, this is my Pride Month video of the year. There, I did it. I stamped my card. I did it. I filled my quota. I did it. Infinity Train Book 2 is the best season of this show in my opinion. Not only does it have the most personally relevant themes for me specifically, but the characters, villain, action, plot, environments, and animation are some of the best in the show. While I do not vibe as much with Jesse, he is one character in a cast of many in this season. In particular, Lake is the character that really struck a chord with me, and she is my favorite character in the entire show, and although we are only halfway through with this show, she has some steep competition, both behind her and ahead of her. This season also does the best job with balancing its comedy and its drama, being the most even viewing experience between all 4 seasons. While Book 3 is what many consider to be the best season of the show, and for good reason too, Infinity Train Book 2 holds a special place in my heart as the most relatable and my overall favorite season of this incredible show. While Book 2 of Infinity Train balances comedy and drama the best of any season in the show, Book 3 decides to have a more consistent tone overall. Does that mean Book 3 finally babies itself and commits to the more lighthearted side of the show as it starts to resemble what most people consider a stock standard kids show? Oh.
I don't feel safe.
More on Book 3 to follow.